Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Louisa. If you're new, don't forget to subscribe, and if you're coming back, welcome back. And today, as promised, I am going to talk about Teal Swan. I was originally going to talk about her book, The Anatomy of Loneliness, but it's exam week and I just haven't had time. For those of you who aren't familiar, I am studying psychology, so this is kind of my wheelhouse. If you're interested in content about psychology and spirituality and how those things kind of coincide and overlap, then this is hopefully the channel for you. So I decided to set my sights on analysing some of Teal Swan's work, which was a little bit shorter. In this instance, it's a video less than 12 minutes long. And I was looking up the anatomy of loneliness to see if there were, many videos on the overall book. There were a lot that were like an hour long and one that was sort of a promotional ad for the book. I watched that one. It wasn't really any more informative than the skim reading that I had been able to do. But one of the videos that came up in my search on YouTube caught my attention for all the wrong reasons. It's called, "Do You Need Space? If so, you are being inauthentic." What? So at first I thought, okay, this is probably just clickbait, and no doubt when I watch the video there will be some qualifications and justification and provisos around like who is her target audience, what sort of things is she addressing, how does her advice apply to alone time, is she talking about alone time in general, is she attacking introverts? But I watched the whole thing, and every time I thought that she was getting to a point where she was like going to give some qualifying statement and proviso around what she's talking about, no. No. So the title is actually very, very accurate for what it is that she's trying to say. She is literally saying in this video, if you need any alone time whatsoever, then you are being inauthentic. And that's absolutely wild. The assertion that as a social species, human beings need zero alone time, and only people who are authentic don't struggle with needing space from people. I was like, in no way, shape or form does any data support this. So yeah, as I'm watching the video, I'm kind of thinking to myself like, who is her target demographic? Is she talking to introverts in general? Well, she talks about childhood enmeshment trauma. So it kind of sounds like her target audience is people who have complex PTSD or people who have attachment issues. And it's strange because the advice that she dispenses, some of it is advice that psychologists would give to people who have personality disorders, like how to be authentic, how to have genuine connection with people without pretending to be someone that you're not. And so that's generally good advice. Like you don't want to be in a relationship where you're not being yourself. One of the things that she said in her video, which is very good and very accurate, is that you can't have a genuine loving connection with someone if they don't know the real you. And so that's true, but that's usually the sort of counseling advice that you would give to someone who has like a cluster B personality disorder, like histrionic or borderline. And then there's the other part of her advice, which you would never give to anybody ever, which is that there is absolutely no valid reason for not connecting with people or for wanting alone time. At one point she kind of contradicts herself and she says that alone time is a tool. So, like, does it serve a purpose or does it not serve a purpose? Like, is she saying that if you need alone time to recalibrate, then that's a tool, but that's not a tool because as soon as you use that tool, you're being inauthentic? I didn't really understand that part. So her entire justification and her entire body of evidence to back up this assertion that no one ever, for any reason, should be wanting alone time from other human beings, ever, is because people spend time with dogs. Yes, that's it. That's literally her entire argument, is people have pets. So she says, if you're totally happy to spend time with your dog, if you are comfortable in the presence of your pet, when you are not comfortable in the presence of other people, then there's something wrong with you. At no point does she say that maybe there's something wrong with the people that you're hanging out with. She kind of covers this at a later date, but not really. I'll get to that shortly. But yeah, the dog thing. The dog thing doesn't really stack up because dogs spend like 80% of their day sleeping or just chilling and dozing and pretty much doing nothing. Like, they're not demanding attention. They're not needing social interaction. They don't need anything from you. My dog's literally over there right now, sleeping. If he needed constant attention from me, he would be outside, because I have study and I have a job and I have housework that needs doing. I live alone and I have plenty of close relationships. I have good friends. I have a boyfriend. Some of you might not be aware of that, but yes, I have a boyfriend. We have been dating since the beginning of the year, maybe a little bit before that in December. So yeah, we spend plenty of time together, but we also spend time apart because we are fully functional, autonomous human beings who do not need constant input from other people. And it's the same if you live in a household of other people. Let's say you live with your family. You don't spend 24/7 in each other's pockets. You have time apart in your respective areas of the house. Someone might be gardening. Someone might be listening to a podcast. Someone might be working on a car. People actually have hobbies. And sometimes those hobbies are individual things. Like, for example, I do painting in my spare time. I make videos. I don't have people here with me making the videos. This is just something that I do on my own. So I do a lot of reading and I do a lot of research and I do a lot of listening to podcasts and videos. And then I film on my own and then I edit on my own. And that does not make me an inauthentic person. And while I'm doing those introverted things, yeah, my dog is there, my cat is there. They're hanging out in the same room. But I can tell you now that if the cat climbs up on my lap while I'm trying to edit, I don't necessarily have time to give her the attention that she wants. I will give her some attention when I have time, but sometimes she will demand attention when I don't have time, like when I'm trying to brush my teeth. And at that point, I just have to push her away because otherwise she will literally climb onto my back while I'm bending over the sink. So it kind of seems from the video, because she just broadly categorizes any choice of spending alone time as being inauthentic. It kind of seems like she is broadly talking to anyone who is even slightly introverted, which is actually most people. What a lot of people don't understand about personality as it has been studied in psychology, and psychology has explored different things like the MBTI, it's not a valid personality construct because of how it defines things like introversion and extroversion. It creates this false dichotomy, and introversion and extroversion are not polar opposites that are mutually exclusive. Extroversion is a continuum that goes from extreme levels of introversion to extreme levels of extroversion. And most people are somewhere in the middle because that's how populations are. That's how statistical data tends to pan out. As a personality trait, extroversion is on a continuum, with most people being somewhere around the mean line, as you can see in this bell graph. And one standard deviation above or below that line comprises 68% of the population. So that's like an average person. An average person is somewhere around the middle. They're a mixture of someone who needs alone time and someone who needs social connection. We all need some alone time and we all need some social connection. The ratio of what you find comfortable and what you find good for your autonomic nervous system, it varies. So each person is slightly different, but most people enjoy some social engagement and they also enjoy some alone time. And having an extreme of one or the other is not usually good for most people. Most people will become either over-aroused if they are in social situations too much, or they will become under-aroused and maybe a bit depressed if they're cut off from people too much, even if they are predominantly introverts. When psychologists find rare outliers at either extreme of extroversion or introversion, these often represent personality disorders. At the extreme end of introversion, we have cluster A personality disorders like schizotypal personality disorder. So these are people who truly are not interested in social connections. They are off in their own world, and that's why it's considered to be a personality disorder, because it's quite maladaptive and they often end up a bit strange. At the extreme end of extroversion, we have cluster B personality disorders, especially histrionic and borderline, where someone is decidedly uncomfortable by not being the center of attention, and they will use all sorts of antics to divert attention onto themselves. So borderline personality, people tend to freak out if their partner even leaves the room to go to the toilet. Even that amount of separation from another person can trigger all sorts of abandonment fears. And histrionic personality disorder are so needy for attention that they cannot stand to be alone for any amount of time. They are constantly on social media. They are constantly diverting attention back to themselves in group situations. They will message everyone all the time, looking for any kind of attention and engagement, even if it's negative. This isn't healthy. Extreme levels of introversion are not healthy, and extreme levels of extroversion are not healthy. And what Teal Swan is talking about is extreme levels of extroversion. It almost sounds like she's someone who has a personality disorder and she's trying to give advice to people based on what she thinks is the correct way of being, and also various amounts of counseling advice that she's had in the past to be her authentic self, rather than manipulating people by faking a persona and shaming anyone who is different to her. I have no idea if she has a personality disorder, and it's kind of impossible to say, but that's just what it sounds like. And the funny thing about this video is, if she is shaming introverts for being their authentic self, then that is entirely hypocritical. So she describes how to be authentic, and she says that boundaries are nothing more than personal preferences. They are the things that you say yes to and the things that you say no to. And it's funny because at no point are you allowed to say yes to wanting alone time. She's insisting that if you have a preference for spending time on your own, then you are being inauthentic. Why? Because she says so. It's kind of like she's saying, be authentic. No, not like that. You are not allowed to have that preference. So yeah, she's essentially telling quite a large portion of the population that there's something wrong with them, even though psychology says there is nothing wrong with them. But no doubt if she ever saw this video, she would probably use the same spiritual abuse that other New Age teachers use, which is to discredit someone by saying, oh, their pineal gland is probably calcified, or writing them off as unenlightened or whatever, instead of actually listening to anything that anyone says based on real evidence and real research. I can totally understand why someone with histrionic personality disorder, for example, would think that this is good advice, that you need to be constantly in contact with other people at all times in order to be authentic, because people with histrionic personality disorder and borderline personality disorder, they literally spiral into depression as soon as they have no attention. I've seen this in people that I know who have this personality disorder, and by the way, it's not a uniquely female thing. There is a bit of a gender bias in the diagnosis of these particular personality disorders, but I've actually met more men who have histrionic personality disorder than women. So from that point of view, I can understand, it makes sense of a lot of the context for the book that she wrote. So The Anatomy of Loneliness, she tends to talk about human connection as an either or, black or white dichotomy, which is very much a cluster B thing called splitting. So I'll just read the back of the book for you. Have you ever been surrounded by people but felt the pull of loneliness? So, number one thing, when it comes to being in bad relationships, being in toxic relationships, you can be surrounded by people and still be more lonely than you actually are on your own. And for some reason, she doesn't seem to acknowledge that there is actually an issue with the relationship, with the person that you're trying to connect to. And instead she just victim blames and says, oh, that's because you're not being authentic. It's no, it's because that person is abusive. Every moment is a choice to close or to open. Every moment is a choice to separate or connect. So we've got the dichotomy here where it's you are either open or you are closed. There's no such thing as allowing people to have a certain amount of access to your life. It's you must give them all access pass, otherwise you're closed off. Find around you those people who have chosen to open. Find in your life those people who have chosen the path of connection, and let them walk with you hand in hand into the world. Be brave enough to connect. Be brave enough to love. Okay, so it is important to be brave and take some risks when it comes to connection and love and friendship. But you also need discernment. You need to discern if that person is good for you or not, which means that you need to spend time assessing the relationship, and you only give them a certain amount of access to your life, a certain amount of personal intimacy, and you see how that goes. One of the things that I found when I was in the New Age, one of the big issues, is that people want this instant connection with someone. They want to be best friends and soulmates instantly, like, oh, we've shared past lives together, we're twin flames, we're this, we're that, we're soulmates. And it's like, that's really stupid. If you want to get abused, then just let someone love bomb you. If you want to get abused, then just give someone complete trust and complete access to your life, because that's how you end up abused. And it's spiritual pseudo-psycho gurus like Teal Swan who keep perpetuating the cycle of abuse by telling their followers that this is normal and that this is acceptable, when it's actually extremely dangerous. When it comes to helping trauma victims to recover and establish healthy and supportive relationships, counselors give them infographics like this, which outlines the key differences between safe, unsafe, and abusive relationships. In terms of personal time, pictured in the light blue here, it literally says, under the healthy section, you enjoy spending time together and respect when one of you needs time apart. It's literally abusive to control how another person spends their time, including shaming them for wanting their own space every now and then. Again, this is the sort of advice that you would get from someone who has a very unhealthy relationship with other people. Whether she has a cluster B personality disorder or not, she does not have good advice for people when it comes to relationships. Trauma survivors who have experienced extremely unsafe relationships should never be shamed and blamed for having social anxiety. Teal Swan sounds like a gaslighting abuser in this video. She tells people with relationship trauma that if they feel like someone is encroaching on their sense of self and they try to get distance from that person, then the trauma survivor is in, quote, defiance and rebellion to another person, unquote. It almost sounds like she thinks that you are a slave to other people. Like, defiance and rebellion to another person? Do they own you? She also says if you feel resistance to any of her assertions, then you have issues. At 6 minutes 55, she gives the weirdest fake laugh, which made me feel like I was watching self-help from a Bond villain. She says that being distant with people means that eventually they will abandon you because nobody likes to be rejected. In my experience, normal, healthy people barely notice when someone is being a bit reclusive, and they certainly don't take it personally when someone needs alone time. Healthy relationships start out slowly anyway. Teal Swan acknowledges that some people are easier to be around than others, but then just moves on like that's irrelevant to the conversation, when it's extremely relevant. It's weird, because she talks about enmeshment trauma. And she talks about how enmeshment trauma happens because someone has forced you into a role, they have crossed a whole bunch of personal boundaries, they have demanded things from you that were completely unreasonable. But she just seems to think that that's your fault. Rather than saying, these people should never have done that, you should never have been subjected to that, you should not have to put up with that ever again, and if you find people trying to do that shit to you, you have every right to cut them off. She says, no, you're being inauthentic. Why should you have to put up with stressful people? If someone is smothering you, or forcing intimacy, or love bombing, or being inappropriate with your time and your personal belongings, you have every right to tell them to back off. If they threaten to abandon or reject you, let them. Call their bluff. Teal's advice is that if you hold firm to your authentic self, then people who preferred the mask will quote unquote peace out, which only really happens if you actually deny them access to your life. That's usually the real reason why boundary breakers peace out, is because they can't have your attention. Being quote unquote inauthentic is not an issue which trauma victims have. Learning how to say no and advocate for their own personal space can be something trauma victims struggle with. Shaming trauma victims for protecting their personal space and time when they need it is bad advice. Trauma survivors need to become adept at being the gatekeepers of their personal peace. They need to develop screening tools so they can discern who is safe to have around and who is a manipulative abuser. If Teal's advice is aimed at trauma survivors, then it's bad advice. It's dangerous advice, and it makes me really mad. If her advice is aimed at introverts, then it's just weird and pointless. And if her advice is aimed at like cluster B personality disorders, then they do need to learn how to be authentic, and they do need to learn how to show up in a genuine way and stop manipulating people. But they also need to learn to back off. So her advice is bad for them as well, because all she's doing is enabling them. The problem with manipulative people and users and abusers is that they don't just peace out. They actually hang around and try to bully you into giving them what they want. And it's because they have a really twisted idea about who owns your time and your energy and your attention and your personal resources. They truly believe that they are entitled to your time. They truly believe that they are entitled to your energy and all of your property and that they own your attention, and if you deny them that, then you are denying them their property. So they will do things like shaming and guilting to coerce people. And not only do they not go away, and they continue to bully and coerce and push and push and push and push, but even if you tell them to literally get out, they will keep coming back. So trauma survivors literally need to learn how to cut people off much sooner than they ever usually do. They need to learn how to have gradual connection with people, how to go one step at a time instead of rushing headlong into friendships and relationships. That phenomenon where someone sweeps you off your feet, that is a red flag. If someone held you up and like physically mugged you on the street, demanded that you hand over property, or if they jumped into your car beside you and literally carjacked you, you would be able to identify that behavior as a crime. But manipulative people are emotionally and psychologically mugging you. They are life-jacking you, not carjacking, life-jacking. If you're wondering why you feel violated by people disrespecting when you say no, or disrespecting when you say, I need some time alone, that's why. Like, they are literally mugging you. And at the end of the day, you are better off having no friends than having abusive friends, because what it says on the back of her book about being alone in a room full of people is what happens when you surround yourself with toxic users. And also, when you surround yourself with toxic users, normal and healthy people are put off by that. They don't want to associate with those people. They're not comfortable with them because they haven't been acclimatized to the toxic environment by growing up in it. Your mental peace is worth defending and protecting, regardless of who takes offense to that. Whether it's some spiritual guru, spouting pseudo-psychology on YouTube, or if it's your family members, or if it's your toxic friends, or if it's someone that you're dating. They can be offended somewhere else in their own time. You are not obligated to give them a relationship. A relationship is something that you give freely at your comfort level. And you certainly don't have to justify wanting to be on your own. There's nothing wrong with that. Even if you're a healthy person, there's nothing wrong with that. And if you're a trauma survivor, sometimes you just really need to detox from people. So if you are a trauma survivor, don't listen to Teal Swan, because she will give you advice that essentially keeps you in a trauma state. She says that she wants people to break free of things like enmeshment trauma, but the sort of things that she's advocating for are the very things that put people in enmeshment trauma. All right, so I'm gonna have some lemon and ginger tea and calm down, because that infuriated me. It's very irresponsible advice. It's very bad advice for trauma victims. To shame them and blame them for the things that they've been through is unacceptable. Anyway, let me know your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share, especially if you know someone who has kind of jumped on the Teal bandwagon, because yeah, I do know people who have been sucked in by some of the stuff that she says, because not everything that she says is incorrect. There's a mixture of truth and error, but it's the error part that's really dangerous. Anyway, that's my 2 cents worth as a psychology student on how Teal Swan handles trauma advice. Take care out there. I will see you next time. Bye.